Do you want to make this episode after the Canelo recap? Let's do an episode
What is
after
it? No, real time. Bill Maher calls this shit real time, overtime.
Fuck Bill Maher.
Yeah, so fuck Bill Maher.
What's been on your mind?
Yeah, you just said fuck Bill Maher.
Yeah, fuck Bill Maher. He's too much, man.
Why? Explain.
I don't want to model our show after. I think you were starting to say, what does Bill Maher call his show? And I just said fuck Bill Maher because I don't want to model our show after anyone else's show.
He does an overtime special with his guests afterwards where he has.
Oh, gotcha. That's what you were trying to reference, right?
Yeah. He has his guests come in. They're
talking.
talking.
His show is obnoxious.
You say Bill Maher's obnoxious, huh?
Yeah.
This is surprising to hear from a Democrat to say this.
Yeah. Quick, because he gives. First of all, I guess you could say I'm a liberal, right?
Yeah.
But he gives liberals a bad name. He's obnoxious, pretentious. He doesn't even follow his own rules. I don't like the guy very much.
So why is he? You can't just make blanket statements and not follow it up. So why is he obnoxious and pretentious?
He's pretentious because the way he speaks is as if he comes with like he's on his high horse at all times. You know what I mean? Like everyone who has a different opinion of him is automatically stupid, and you're supposed to take everything he says.
Yeah, I think these are all fair things to say.
You know what I mean? I just don't like his attitude.
He's a fucking comedian too, so we got to start there, right?
Right.
So,
Was he a stand-up comic before?
Oh yeah, Bill Maher made his name in comedy, and then he started with the political.
Well, that's the tough thing is that like if you're a comedian, be a comedian. And then, like, do you want to be taken seriously as a political commentator? Like,
I think there's a lot of comedians out there. Chris Rock comes to mind.
That's how you lose. That's how you lose people when you go too deep into politics.
But I say there's a lot of comedians in mind. Chris Rock comes to mind. George Carlin comes to mind. Bill Maher comes to mind. When you go and watch these guys do a comedy show, there's an expectation that you're going to be running into some shit that we're seeing in society, and definitely politics. I mean, Chris Rock. And Dave Chappelle is another one.
Yeah.
These guys aren't as big as they are today if they're not sort of, shining that light on the bullshit that we're seeing happening in our everyday lives. So, For some reason, I think that they did that a lot better than Bill Maher's doing it right now. George Carlin was a genius at bringing up societal issues that we didn't quite process yet, but we related to when we heard him deliver. I love his bit about the names today. You know this bit?
Tad and whatever.
The names that people are naming their kids today, specifically in these.
We could update that because today it's all Jalen, Talon, Jaden, Braden.
And explain it to everybody. The names that they're naming people in suburban sort of white communities, the Tylers, the Tanners, the Tads, and the names that people were getting named back in his day, the Jimmies, the Johnnies, the Bobbies, and the bit is that Bobbies, Jimmies, and John could always beat up, Tyler, Tanner, and Carver or Kendall. Because these are just soft ass names. Soft ass names for soft ass times. It always trips me out that the name Austin. So many people. It's like you can go through South Orange County and it's going to be Dylans and Austins. And so actually, I have two cousins named Dylan and Austin. Holy shit! I didn't think about that.
Yeah. You're kind of one of that. Like your name is Trevor.
I'm Trevor. Yeah.
You're
Listen, my parents didn't make
a Mexican kid named Trevor. Did you get taken?
Oh my god!
Yeah, I gotta imagine. Walk around.
This is the biggest joke. Is that
this guy talks like he's black, looks like he's brown, and has a name that's really a South Orange County name.
It's a South Orange County name. Listen.
Trevor Sambrano.
My life would have been a lot easier, specifically in Norwark, California. Which is, for the most part, it's a Varrio, right?
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah.
Depends on,
Yeah. And so had my name been Marcos or, any other name besides Trevor.
Yeah.
So it's like Gringolandia, right? It's just like, it's very, very well name.
Did your parents name you that as an opportunity? They're like, all right. Because my mom teaches ESL here in San Pedro, and What's common is a lot of these immigrants will give their names as like an opportunity. They'll give their children names that are like excessively American.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times the name Johnny will just be on the birth certificate. It won't be like John or Juan. It'll straight up be Johnny or Jason.
Yeah.
Or a lot of these names are extremely, like maybe Anglo or
I don't
American
think that
names. Were they going for like, oh, we want an all-American boy to have this all-American name?
My parents actually misspelled my name on the birth certificate. So
nice.
my name's actually not Trevor. It's actually Trevor. As they, right. So it could be worse, right? I'd rather have.
That's like that guy on the. I was announcing the fights recently, and it was a Brian.
Brian, yeah,
Braian. Yeah. And then the very next bout, there was another kid, a Brian, Braian or whatever. You know, the common way.
Yeah.
But that extra syllable they added, I don't know. It's funny.
Yeah.
That's been going on forever though. I gotta go on for that.
Just to jump into this though, there's a bias that's been reported through academia that people obviously are given preference for names, specifically when we're talking about something like systemic racism. So we've all
read Freakonomics, right?
Yeah. If you're reading a resume that is coming over, and and this is saying your name is, we'll use a fighter, Humberto Soto, right, or Joanne Guzman. And versus if you're reading a resume from Garrity McCosker, even you've got an ethnic name, but we'll say like a Dylan Smith, which is a very sort of American name. That when someone's reading that resume, that if the person that you're dealing on the other end that's reading that resume isn't a person of color, that they maybe cognitively or uncognitively, subconsciously show a bias towards a name that they can, that they're going to be able to read easier and so forth. So these things are playing out and shit. Not to be like Bill Maher, but they're definitely playing out in society.
Yeah. I wanted to tell a little family story about names, and so your parents named you Trevor.
Yeah.
Which you never know, might catch on in the next wave, but
let's hope not. Trevor's already a dog's name.
My great grandmother's name was Wilma.
Wilma, like Flintstones.
Yeah, Wilma. Right. It was an old name back in the time, right? But here's the good part: they were from like.
Are there any Barneys?
They're hardcore Bostonians, like. The whole accent, all that,
Chowder heads?
Yeah, sort of, uneducated Irish working class from Boston.
That's
years later, get this. Years later, I think it was my grandmother then takes a look at her mother's birth certificate, and what was written down, she'd been called Wilma her whole life.
Right.
What had been written down was actually Wilmer.
Because
Wilmer written out Wilmer would be the way you would pronounce. That's the way you would say Wilma with a Boston accent.
With a Boston, yeah.
That'd be the way you'd say Wilma.
Yeah. Listen, that's hilarious. I just want to say this to Daniel, and he can probably back me up on this. Bostonian is some white people shit. Have you ever said Bostonian in your life? Like, no. For someone to use it like in a Bostonian sort of way, like that's definitely.
I don't know.
That's some white people shit. It's okay.
I suppose it is.
It's like I know that people from Boston call themselves chowder heads, right? Chowder.
Yeah, or massholes.
Yeah. So what's so crazy is you end up knowing more about Boston. For me, just to be honest, I knew more about Massachusetts and Boston because of the two famous actors, Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, thank you.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I sort of like.
We don't know though.
I wouldn't know what Southie was and all that shit.
And we may also be getting some sort of highlight reel or like glorified.
Oh yeah. Idealized. Yeah. What was the movie with?
It happens with California, all the time.
Whitey Bulger, right?
Whitey Bulger.
Yeah, Bulger. Thank you. Yeah.
He just got killed, right?
Did he pass?
He got killed. He didn't pass away. He got his face smashed in.
Yeah, he got destroyed.
Where in prison?
So they were transferring him prisons, and we're in the network of organized crime. Apparently, it was well known that he was going to get transferred to the spot.
Well, he snitched too, right?
There was a hit out.
Yeah.
So there was a hit out against him, and they broke his face, right? But
they put a lock in a sock and just beat his face in, basically.
Yeah. And that's an old man. Yeah. It's not like
well, he got caught in Santa Monica.
Yeah, that's where he was living for many years.
Yeah. For many years, he escaped Boston and was out in Santa Monica.
Just kind of the criminal next door.
Just the criminal. You know why? Because he got a bunch of old people. He fit right into that demographic that have money that probably just retiree and was walking around. I can't believe. Yeah, I mean, did you see the movie Whitey Bulger?
No, I didn't see the movie.
Yeah, Johnny Depp did a good job on it.
It's called Black Mass.
Black Mass. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was not too long ago.
Yeah, it's a good movie. I mean, shit, anything for the most part. Johnny Depp for the most part did a good job of making movies besides a couple. So.
You didn't like Charlie Brown and the Chocolate Factory? Or
no,
Charlie and the Chocolate Factory?
No,
Charlie Brown.
Charlie Brown.
What is that?
I'm mixing it.
Willy Wonka.
Chocolate's Brown.
Willy Wonka. Yeah. I mean.
Oh yeah.
Gene Hackman is the first Willy Wonka.
He was.
No.
Yeah.
That was Gene Wilder.
Gene Wilder. I'm sorry. Yeah, Gene Wilder. There's certain things. Yeah.
This is the episode about names.
Yeah. There's certain movies I don't know if you're supposed to redo. They're redoing something else right now that I was kind of surprised.
They were doing everything, man.
Yeah. It's crazy that the generation doesn't remember. Like it's like.
I wasn't raised on movies.
10 or 20 years from now, nobody remembers anything. Just redo it. I'm sorry. Has Rambo came out again?
It's coming out this year, yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
That's
so,
great.
Yeah.
It's a formula. Like, Daniel, you're a film guy. It's a formula. Like, rather than take a risk on introducing the world to a brand new story, like revamp an old narrative. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it has a kind of a consistent return, right?
It can.
Yeah.
It can.
Yeah.
But I mean, everything's been told before. All Disney's movies are older,
right.
Have been done.
Oh, we're talking about like the story arc of the hero's journey kind of thing, or
I think there's with creativity, if there's something, if something's been written or something's been out there before, it's ridiculous not to look at it, and because there's a measurement of energy that went into that. So a lot of times it's like boxing too. If you can do something through your perspective and through your maybe experiences of life, and create something that's better or relevant to how you see things, then it too is going to be a piece of art.
I agree. I believe in stealing. I believe in stealing. It's not stealing if you do your own work.
Everyone, with chefs particularly, like they're all using the same ingredients, for example, but everybody has their different spin with how much they're going to add into a particular dish and so forth. And that's going to be different to the palate. So
it is funny how like this new era of like rock star chefs has come about.
Oh yeah.
And Tim Dillon, who's a hilarious comedian, he recently had something where I don't know I can't remember if it was one of his tweets or one of his podcast episodes, but he said stop with this glorification of chefs and cooks. Like you're not doing something like we have this idea that like these badasses with rolled up t-shirts and flexing their muscles. Like they're not doing anything great. You're peeling tomatoes and dipping them in water. Like you're prepping pasta. I forgot exactly what he said, but I think after Anthony Bourdain's popular show, all these other these cooking shows that got all great TV, but we have glorified cooks, and he's kind of saying like
listen to be honest about the experience of food, which is something that I've always looked at, which is kind of fascinating to me, which is like you can be like a white nationalist, for example, right? You can be like just as racist as fuck, right? And just literally be indoctrinated into your dogma, and you're reading all your little propaganda pamphlets and so forth, and afterwards be like, hey,
want to get tacos?
You want to get some tacos? You want to get some? Let's go get a quesadilla. Let's go get a burrito. I mean, there's power in that experience of food.
There's power to food, sure.
Yeah, and somebody like Bourdain that was out there doing what Bourdain was doing, which is introducing us to parts of the world that we would have never seen before. No.
Yeah, but what Tim Dillon was saying was that.
Yeah.
I don't think he was making fun of guys like that. But I think he was making fun of all the hipsters in the cafe that he was going to that thought they were tight because by transitive property, hey, I'm a cook with arm tattoos. No, you're just fucking killing a potato.
It's a couple things too. There's a parallel with comedy too, because comedy could do what? It could literally cross boundaries, cross lines, right? But I understand what Tim is saying, which is like you go to some hipster ass restaurant, and the guy taking your order has like a leather, Texas Chainsaw Massacre apron on, and he's got like tattoos. And,
I'm just tired of these people who take themselves too seriously for doing something that, your mom and dad did for you also. You've made food, you've experimented with something, but
I think
if we can make a a $6 dish, $15, we think we're badasses now.
It's also to say something about this generation, which is absolutely consumed with identity. I mean, shit. How could you? We're seeing so many digital images every day, whether it's via our smartphone devices, via our time spent on the internet and so forth. That identity is just, we're the only life on the planet that has this just incredible exponential measurement of identity, which is to say, I just, did a podcast with an old man sweater on, before this, and I say, hey, I'm going to change my jacket because of identity for it to look like, hey, we're not doing the podcast the same day. It's if I want to dress punk rock, I can ask you to borrow something, and all of a sudden, I don't know, maybe if I got a hat on, I could show up like a punk rocker. I don't know. But the thing is that you have
lose the Yeezys first. Whatever the hell
this is just some Adidas. But every day, I'm saying is we're sort of being hijacked by identity, and it's probably happening much more so on a much more efficient rate. Because imagine now, it's like, you can imagine 50 or 60 years ago, 70 years ago, you're not constantly getting a feed of images that are more or less pushing, a narrative, pushing identity, pushing this idea of aspirations and what it is that you want to be. And we're not encountering that every day. Now we're encountering this idea of identity that we see in our social media. We're seeing identity, through our friends and through Yeezys, through whatever it is. And so when we're looking at a bunch of hipsters that think that they're tough because they have mustaches.
All the kids that all the kids that were emo, like by fashion, have all transferred into like being like
hipsters.
A different type of. It's like it's a trend. What if you were big on a trend then, you're on this trend.
You don't ever trip out on this. I always think about this. We're the only life that has identity on the planet. And that's to say that I could walk away from here today and all of a sudden turn myself into a Mormon if I wanted to. And
that almost happened one time, right?
Yeah.
Let's
you want to hear my Mormon story?
That's a good one.
Mormon stories is that I'm living in Norwark. Norwark is kind of, Norwark is Norwark. I don't know if people are familiar with it, but, definitely during the 80s and 90s, lower socioeconomic strata, a lot of gang violence, a lot of shootings, a lot of stabbings,
Basically, he's trying to tell you he's tough.
No, I'm not trying, but so these guys knock on the door, and they're just, there's two what they call elders. They knock on the door, and
are these the young boys that?
These are young boys that ride on the bikes. The more.
In my gap year when I was living in East LA, and I was working as a car salesman, and I didn't have a car yet myself for the first.
What the hell is a gap year?
Basically, I was trying to be a fighter, and I got into Notre Dame. I wrote them a letter saying, "Can I defer? I'm gonna go work for a year." Yeah. So some people do their gap year and they go to Spain, and they're just like delaying.
More white people shit though. Name it as a gap year.
But I named it as that so I can get away with doing it.
Yeah. It's easier to explain to the parents.
What I was trying to do.
And Notre Dame also.
What I was trying to do was I had this crazy dream. I was gonna go to Sean Estrada's gym, Eddie Herrera's boxing club in East LA, train with Mosqueda, and get an opportunity to go to the Olympic trials.
Yeah.
Crazy long shot, but I
2011 or 2015?
This was 2009.
Okay. Getting ready for 2012.
Getting ready for 2012.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And I got a job. I didn't want my parents to. I'm gonna get really fast. I want to get to your Mormon story, but I was mistaken for a Mormon on a bike because I was a white guy in a Latino neighborhood on a bike, and I was wearing like a short sleeve button down. No tie, but still. So I was pedaling out there, whatever, to Camino Real Chevrolet, and the sales manager was teasing me like, dude. You look like a Mormon coming in here, dude. Get yourself a car.
Listen,
I can sell you a car. And I was like, get away.
In some ways, this sounds crazy, but they were like colonizing the hood, like the first ones to kind of go back into the hood with like mountain bikes and shirts. Yeah, because you could imagine, just imagine you're from some, you're banging and you're from some set. This is whatever MS or 18s or whatever, and then all of it there's a learning curve. Hey, fool, who are these dudes on bicycles?
Where are you from? I'm from
trip out,
the Latter-day Saints.
The Latter-day Saints. Dude, I'd like to talk to you about Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon. So anyways, they knock on my door. They were nice. I was more or less. I think I was in the 8th grade.
You were looking for belonging.
Yeah, no, I was just finished with dealing.
Basically, let's be honest. Let's be honest. They're preying on the same thing that gang elders will prey on.
Yeah.
They're preying on young kids who need a sense of identity, a sense of belonging.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And because you're running to something or away from something.
Yeah.
When you join a new religion, when you join a gang,
and to be,
there's similarities.
To be honest, and they probably don't know that, and probably gang members don't know that.
It's
either.
a natural psychology thing.
But there's a repugnant need for us to want to belong and to be involved in shit. But they knocked on the door. For the most part, as a young kid, I'd been beaten up and jumped, and it was just kind of a nightmare to deal with the gangs in the neighborhood.
Being called Trevor.
And my sister and I were playing tennis. If you remember, and we're like riding bikes around, and it's just like we're having to cross the street because the cholos are on one side, or knowing like you had to be home before it gets dark, specifically during the summer because it starts to crack off and it gets live. So these guys knock on the door, and they were nice. They were cool, man. They were just young. They were young dudes, probably about 18 to 20, I imagine. And they said, "Hey, do you want to talk about the Book of Mormon?" And I kind of like how I am today. I was like, yeah, sure, why not? And they came in, and they started coming, and they would come maybe once a week or twice a week, and they sort of built this relationship and friendship for a while. And I started going to the church. I started making friends with people in the Mormon Church, and man, I almost got back.
Was there any love interest?
No, there's no love.
Really?
But I would say there's love.
Because I would have thought that maybe you got smitten by some young girl at the church, and
but
that
it
was the reason why you kept coming back to youth group.
You're in middle school, and you're access to a lot of girls. So of course there was girls there, but no interest in particular I remember. But more or less, I'm getting ready.
But you also knew that you're allowed to have 3 wives.
Shit!
So you're like, shit.
That polygamy? No, I mean, most obviously that doesn't happen today. No,
it does happen though.
And some of those weird fringe cults that are going on, but for the most part, it's not happening.
Not Norwark, but it's happening in Utah.
So I'm gonna.
It is.
No, the Church of Mormon.
What about that one that just got busted up?
Yeah, so that we're talking about these. Well, let me finish my story, then we'll get to that.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty much, my sister's involved too, and looks like we're gonna become Mormons. And I go to one of the youth meetings.
How old are you this time?
I'm probably about 13. I'm pretty sure, positive almost. And I'm walking around, and it was cool, man. They had a bunch of kids, drinking punch, and there were rules. You couldn't drink coffee.
A bunch of adults drinking punch.
Yeah,
that's
a bunch
all
of
you
adults.
can have, right? You can't.
And treating everybody cool. And man, I'll tell you the story, and it's kind of personal, but who cares? I'm walking up the stairs, and the bishop, who's the head of the Mormon Church, for that particular ward is what they call it.
Yeah.
I get introduced by my friend's father, Mr. Matthews, and he says, "This is Trevor. He'll be getting baptized with the Mormon Church." And he looks at me and he says, I laugh at it. He goes, "I'm so happy that more Mexicans are joining the church."
Here you are with your own identity crisis.
This is a true story, right? And so literally, you can imagine you're in the 8th grade, and
almost that.
And it was like. It was kind of like a shock, like a stab to the abdomen, like it was like boom, and then all of a sudden I remember looking, and dude, I say this as it happened yesterday. I looked down into the living room and over into the dining room, and I'm looking at all the kids talking to each other, and then it hit me. I was like, wait a minute, yeah, I am the brownest one in this room. And that was the end of my stint with the Mormon Church. So I almost ended up on a bike on a mission in some foreign country, colonizing people with my with
you know what?
religious ideology.
I feel bad for the 2 gentlemen that came to your house, because some people get assignments to go to Hawaii.
Right.
Some people get assignments to go to Peru or
right.
Somewhere in Latin America.
Yeah.
They had to go to Norwark.
They had to go to Norwark.
Like,
so
I mean, it's not as exciting. It's not a great, not a great assignment.
But I have a lot of friends that I don't particularly talk to any of them, but anymore. But I definitely knew a lot of Mormons growing up. They're all great people. It's not that I know.
The only Mormons I ever knew were from rugby. Those were good dudes too.
Yeah. So but anyways, that's That's our Mormon story.
That's a good story.
Yeah.
Did you want to talk about what happened in what we're down in Long Beach this weekend?
Oh yeah, we can talk about that. So Long Beach had a rally that was coming up that was supposed to be a white supremacist rally or white nationalist rally in Long Beach at the park right there in downtown. Not too far. I'm trying to remember which park, but it's right there in the heart of it between Belmont and downtown. You know when people say this, I always hear people say this before, like man, why don't those white supremacists go down to Compton, or why don't they go down to Inglewood, or or Watts and try to do their marches and see what happens then, right? Well, I imagine at first they heard of Long Beach and they were like, oh, this probably, yeah, we're gonna go to Long Beach. We're gonna have a.
Well, Long Beach is, if you're listening and you're not from the area,
yeah.
Long Beach is a big city, and there's many Long Beaches out. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
people may, if they hear Long Beach, they may not know. They may have an image of Long Beach as Snoop Dogg's Long Beach, or Long Beach as whatever, like the tech bubble that the tech scene in downtown. Yeah. There's a lot of Long Beaches. There's a very nice Long Beach.
North side Long Beach, east side Long Beach. There's obviously Belmont Shores.
It's its own city. It's quite big. It's
Naples. Yeah. There's Bixby Knolls.
Yeah.
There's
all the Bixby's are.
Heights. Yeah. There's a lot of.
So you got a little bit of everything.
Got a little bit of everything, but I think that when they were coming down there, it probably sounded like a good idea. The one thing about Long Beach, and I was saying this in the gym the other day, is that 1.5 miles, even in the heart of the East Side, which we're in the heart of the East Side, right there by VIP Records, on
Jackrabbits.
Yeah, Jackrabbit Boxing Gun.
Right by the high school.
Right
high school.
Right across
a
from
lot of
Poly.
athletes.
Right.
Poly.
Long Beach Poly. Like, you're still 1.5 miles away from homes that are 7 million or 10 million, which is right there in Belmont, or right there on the coast.
That's not unfamiliar for the rest of LA.
Yeah, that's not. Yeah. So, but I think that with white nationalists or white supremacists coming down to Long Beach to have a rally, that people are going to get in their cars and drive 1.5 miles.
Yeah. So what was the scene like? Did you go to it?
No.
So as a counter protester.
Yeah. The gym.
I wasn't insinuating that Trevor.
I thought you were there. That's no. The gym. I
have a story about it. One of the rallies that happened. It was like 2010.
Oh, really?
Are you done with the story, or do you have more?
No. I'll just tell you real quick. The gym was going to go to the rally. We had all plans to go to the rally on Sunday. I mean, for what our intent is there, I don't know. It's
to counter-protest, to show up in numbers to people so that they look smaller than they are.
Yeah, it's also a bunch of. It's also like if you have a bunch of people from the gym that are showing up out there, and it wasn't just us. I know Long Beach United, another gym, was out there just asking people to go out too. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if DG.
That's a downtown gym.
It's a downtown gym. Yeah. It's a great gym.
It's a little bit more of a mix between. Gym, boxing gym, and a little bit of the boxer size thing happening. Is that what's going on at United?
Yeah,
not that it matters, but it's a little bit of both.
So I think that Long Beach United has the best of both worlds, right? Yeah. Especially with
you got to make some money, and you
got to make some money, and then you have actual. You've got real people in there that know how to train fighters. Yeah. Malcolm McAllister's in there. Perez is in there. That regional title. So they got Alejandro Perez.
I didn't know Malcolm was at Long Beach United.
Yeah, he's out there. He's out there. Well, he trains at Jackrabbits, and he does some training at Long Beach United. Yeah, I was with Malcolm last night helping him out. But best of both worlds, meaning you have to make money with regular day people, and then you're also putting some fighters together too. So
which is an investment, so you don't really make the money until later.
But, it's a good look. But yeah, I know they had a bunch of people going out to the rally. Everyone was making calls in the morning. Everybody was making calls in the morning, basically saying, "Hey, the supremacists had not showed up." So
yeah, so that's what happens. That's why you. So my story. It was like 2009, I think, 2010, 2009, senior year of high school. This was when like Facebook was new, and like you would see an event and you wouldn't know an event on Facebook, and you didn't know if it was really going to happen or not.
Yeah.
Anyway, there was the NSM, National Socialist Movement, is their name.
Were you in the NSM?
No, dude.
What is the NSM? Is that like some?
That's a neo-Nazi group.
Oh shit, I don't know.
Neo-Nazi group.
Yeah. My bad.
No.
I'm asking you.
And so in my group of, kids that were listening to punk rock and ska and sort of this kind of music, and we were, very much...
well, people don't know that either, Garrity. People don't know that the original ska scene
let me tell you. So the NSM, which is this sort of bonehead group, and when you hear skinhead today, it's people may often think of a neo-Nazi. The true skinheads and the punk rockers will call them boneheads. So this is a bonehead group from, I think, I want to say San Bernardino or Riverside or one of these sort of inland counties in California, and they were going to have a demonstration on the steps of the city hall because they got the permits or whatever.
Where's this, in San Pedro or?
No, in downtown LA.
Downtown, okay.
And so I remember me and my buddies in high school, like I said, our small little group of punk rockers or whatnot. We're like, dude, these neo-Nazis are gonna come to City Hall. We should join the counter protest. And we weren't really sure if the thing was going down or whatever. We show up. There's about 50 of the NSM members doing their little thing. They're basically, the agenda for the day was to talk about the threat of brown to white society in California or something. Some really stupid, whatever. They're just kind of being rabble-rousers just I guess they feel important to know that that people will show up and be angry at them. Anyway, the most impressive part was that there was about 2,000 counter-protesters to their 50 that were there, and you couldn't even hear them over their megaphone. And they basically ended the party early because they were just getting drowned out.
Well, I mean, to be honest just if we're looking at this from a historical perspective, we know that neo-Nazi groups had a spike, white nationalist groups had a spike, white supremacist groups had a spike during the Obama administration. This happened. I mean, this is data that's out there. It's that there was a
militias had a spike for sure.
Yeah, it was a resurgence, and people. It's also to know that looking at Trump, probably use some of these things as from his position to propagate and talk about and use language that he knew would resonate with white separatists. I remember he was he didn't.
The Cambridge Analytica guys knew what the heck they were doing when they.
And he didn't want to come out there and he didn't want to speak up against what happened at Charlottesville.
Charlottesville was a fucking coward.
Yeah, he didn't want to speak out and say, hey, look, what happened at Charlottesville is wrong. Particularly there's murder, right? So with this kind of
you can't give me I don't care how the S&P is doing. And first of all, markets will be markets. So I'm not super worried. I know people will give to whether it's negative or positive. People will give a president too much credit for how the overall economy is doing.
Oh yeah.
No doubt Trump's doing some great things for the economy. Yeah. No doubt consumer confidence is up, and spending is up, and markets are good.
Well, spending is up because doesn't matter because of these tax cuts that benefit the very few.
But here's the deal. Regardless of how well our economy may be doing, when you have a president, and that was the moment for me that I knew that anyone who still is behind this guy is just I'm just disgusted with. When he wasn't willing to condemn the neo-Nazis.
Yeah.
At that point, I was looking at people on his staff, and I was just like, "How are you still with him?" You know what I mean? And eventually, I'm gonna forget his name, but his economic advisor that started with him and eventually left.
There's been some Cohn, yeah.
Cohn, who's a guy who I respect, a smart economist. He'd been at Goldman Sachs prior to joining forces with, but he eventually left over the disagreement with the tariffs. He eventually said, "All right, this isn't really the vision I had set up for us." Anyway, but yeah, what we were saying was at that rally, at that NSM rally, the response by all the counter protesters was much larger. And guess what? It wasn't the
Jerry, you muted your mic again.
It wasn't the hippy dippy liberals that were there to counter protest the neo-Nazi rally. In that crowd, it was mostly punk rockers and skinheads. Mm-hmm. Many of the skinheads being Latinos, but a lot of the trad skinheads.
But so for your
and sharps.
Your everyday American doesn't know that the skinhead actual movement came out of punk rock.
Right.
That they were
and
very,
ska
they,
music.
Ska music. They're very pro diversity.
Yeah.
They were looking at, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was Jamaican culture with the influx of band, and it was coming out of the UK, it was coming out of London, and they got co-opted. And then
because it's a tough look. So later on, in maybe the late 70s, it got taken. I don't know exactly. I'm not a historian of the.
I mean, listen. Just to be honest about this kind of stuff that's still here. I mean, it's not going away. That those guys. It's during these times that, because of the internet, we can find specific bubbles that speak to ourselves. So if you and I are collecting whatever these coffee cups, I'm sure that we can find a group on the internet that collects coffee cups, and there's probably more than 30 of them or more than 50 of them, and all they're doing is talking about collecting travel mugs. And that, when we get involved in these little bubbles, it's literally a little filter bubble. It's just you're pinging your message off of somebody else, and all of a sudden that something that is obviously not normal and probably not up to the standards of what just good people would do is being resonated and is being repeated, and you're basically accepting it. So the thing about about these movements, especially thinking that they're going to do something as bold as showing up to Long Beach to have it's because they're talking to each other and they're thinking it's safe. And to be fair,
so are we thinking that they're not actually getting larger? They're not growing in numbers. They're just amplifying themselves.
They went to the neighboring city. Listen, they had one in Huntington Beach. We know that Huntington Beach is an old vanguard of white supremacy. We know
that's the problem I have with Orange County. I can't ever go to, like, I don't like going to punk shows in Orange County because there's going to be that element every once in a while of that bonehead that's there.
Yeah.
And, he takes off his shirt and you
some,
realize he's got some tattoos. He's got an SS or something.
Yeah.
And you don't find that in LA County. You do not find that in LA County, but you go to Orange County and you'll see that. And it's not a good environment for the music, to be honest.
I've never had to navigate punk shows. I obviously, being in South Orange County, which I have, and
Yeah, you're a different.
You're gonna see skinheads. Yeah. I know you see skinheads in Huntington Beach. I knew that there were skinheads in Long Beach somewhere too. I don't.
That's more the Seal Beach crowd. That's kind of.
Yeah, but I mean, Long Beach is still for the most part a neighboring city with Huntington Beach. But there is a clear division of the feel of Huntington Beach and the feel of Long Beach. There's nothing comparable to the north side of Long Beach. Nothing comparable to the east side of Long Beach, in Huntington Beach. Long Beach is a great city. Vince Staples had talked about this, that Long Beach has the most college graduates out of any city. That Long Beach, in fact, it has this very diverse city with different parts of it, and should be talked about and celebrated, and is an incredible place to be at. So I'm just glad that they didn't show up. But these things are easier for us that whether or not we want to. They're going to be more and more easier out there.
So they absolutely didn't show up? Or
they didn't show up.
They came and then just turned around?
More importantly than anything is that they thwarted a guy, the guy, they arrested a man on Friday who had made arrangements to pick up an IED device, a bomb, and was going to blow it up at the rally, had bought 3-inch nails with the intent that the 3-inch nails would, as when the bomb went off with the flying projectiles, would do as much damage and puncture people's flesh. And so I mean, they arrested somebody that was tied to the neo-Nazi skinhead movement. His intent was to go out there and this is a lot of things that we're seeing with the polarization of politics. This is also something that we're seeing with ideologies that are clashing. No, when you're saying something like "Make America Great Again," there's a novelty and I think that is referencing something that's very nostalgic for perhaps white Americans, which is to talk about the good old days and the times during the 40s and 50s that you can freely run around the street and that exercise a form of white privilege that and anybody that says that this doesn't exist, this is like this is full of shit.
We were just talking about it earlier today. You were asking me, would you drive a...
No, we're not going to talk about that.
We're not going to talk about that?
Yeah, we're definitely not going to. No. No.
Anyway, the basic idea was that I realize I have a white privilege.
Of course,
that exists, and it makes it so much easier for me to get away with this than for you to do this.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. Listen, I have a privilege because my name is Trevor. Trevor. Yeah. I have a privilege too because I am a mixed race. I'm just not like just Latino. I'm a bunch of other things too. And I also have a privilege that you kind of tease me with, which is that the tonality of my voice. Which is sometimes you say I talk black or
talk black, look brown.
Right.
Name is white.
So name is white.
So I got that from do you remember that fighter? I forgot what his name was. Dimitri something, but he was like an Orthodox Jew from.
Oh, I know you're talking about. Yeah.
I can't remember if it was from.
Yeah. He's not from Israel.
He's not from Israel.
Yeah.
He's from Russia, maybe.
Salida. No.
Yeah, Dimitri Salida?
Yeah, I think so.
Like that. But anyway, they did a documentary on him, and his coach, I think it was like in Gleason's or something like that.
Yeah.
His coach was like, he's an interesting guy.
Yeah.
He's
from Brooklyn or
he's from Brooklyn.
Yeah, Bedside thing.
Yeah. And his coach was like, he looks white, he talks Russian, and he fights black.
Right. So, I mean, listen.
I think it was called Unorthodox Stance or Orthodox Stance, the movie they made.
I guess if our listeners out there, if you're talking about white privilege, it's so funny because if we're going to use the word white, it's obviously going to make people have an adverse reaction to it, just like it would be with any other race, and that's just being fair to conversation, right? But we know that other privileges exist out there, specifically like there's a beauty privilege that exists. I mean, if you're handsome as a man or you're beautiful as a woman, there's a privilege. It's
easier to make it in life. Yeah.
It's easier to make it in life. It's easier for people are going to smile. People are going to treat you, better. You're going to probably have a better day interactions out there in the real world and so forth. So it's.
I noticed myself getting frustrated with a employee who at a rush who's not attractive.
Yeah, I mean,
and I think to myself, am I being mean just because this person's overweight and ugly, or am I?
No, but for you,
was I being nicer because that lady was really pretty? And
so these things are at play subconsciously in our minds, right? Oftentimes they're very reflexive. We don't know, that they're going on, but I mean, you can be dealing with somebody that has a certain aesthetic, a certain beauty to them, and you're going to treat them accordingly. You probably treat them better. It's the same thing is gonna factor in with race. When you're looking at, this is where this is going. It's kind of funny, but if we're looking at hierarchies that exist in society, and hegemonies that exist in society. That's a white hegemony. That's a white hierarchy. That's just to say that the majority of people that are in positions of power are white, and that sometimes systemic racism doesn't always have to have the most nefarious look to it. It could just be that you as simply as a guy, and just being like, hey, there's something wrong with your plumbing, and the fact is you come from East LA boxing gyms, and you probably know a plumber that's brown. But if you had not come from East LA boxing gyms and you needed some plumbing done at your house, all of a sudden that guy that you might know is white. But that isn't necessarily. That's just systems, because people that are put in positions of power, that have power, that are able to give out work for the most part in the hierarchy are white folks. You're looking at me.
I'm a little lost.
Are you a little lost on this?
I'm a little lost on what. Were you talking about me?
No. I'm just talking about
person.
Talking about people. Why people, when people hear white privilege, why they pull out so hard? Because people don't want to believe that a white privilege exists. But of course.
Well, what it is, and I know this because I've had conversations with fellow white people. I know what happens.
Yeah.
What happens is you tell me white privilege, and I automatically feel that you just told me I don't work hard.
Right. Yeah.
That's not necessarily what you said.
Yeah. Just said there's a privilege.
Because I have to work incredibly hard to do whatever it is.
Yeah.
But
you're just saying there's a privilege.
To say that it doesn't exist. I think Bill Burr recently talked about this, and he made it. He said it fairly eloquently, but just because you didn't. I mean, just because you're white doesn't mean we're saying you didn't work hard. But let's forget the idea that you can't forget the idea that some things were obviously a lot easier for you because you didn't get pulled over for.
I mean, listen, just seeing what we obviously there's a bunch of kids of color inside the gym, what they have to navigate in their everyday life. This is kind of some of the sediment, some of the feelings that were coming after Katrina, which was like, hey, why don't these people just get in their European SUVs and drive away from New Orleans? What do you mean all these people got stuck on a bridge and they got stuck in that part of New Orleans, and when the hurricane came. It's that not everybody has privilege, and generationally when we're looking at these things, this is an accumulation that has happened over time where people have gone without and there's been a scarcity of resources. And so when we're talking about white privilege, I would just say to everybody, listen, we know that nepotism exists. There should be no quandaries about that. We know that that's a real thing. We know oftentimes, not to say that this is a very, an example of nepotism, but I often think of firefighters as being having a lot of nepotism to it, because you start talking to people and their grandfather and their father and now them are firefighters. That's just by proxy that they're getting access to these jobs, or they know perhaps how to go about getting these jobs, what hurdles to jump over, what I's to dot, or what T's to cross, because somebody's already been there. When we're talking about white privilege, and I think the difference in communities of colors is that if you just graduated with a master's degree and you're from a community like the east side of Long Beach, or you're from Compton, you're from Watts, or you're from Detroit, or you're from the Bronx, you not having other people, now that you have that master's degree, to lean on and say, hey, how exactly did you get a teaching position at a university, versus if you have a master's degree.
There's no anchor pin in that industry to go and.
Let's say you get an MBA and you come from affluence and you come from money, and you're at just someone's Sunday.
What you're doing was buying the network.
You're at a Sunday brunch and with a bunch of family members, and they're saying, hey, guess what? Jessica just graduated from Columbia University with a master's in business administration. Jessica, hey, meet Bill right here. Bill heads up a hedge fund. And all of a sudden, connections gets made. Oh, we're looking for somebody that with an MBA that could steer our clients in the right way. Yeah. So it's them having access to that. And it's just to be fair and to have an honest talk about it. You wouldn't be able to dismantle this easily. I don't think that it's even possible. It's just to give an example of it is if you come from Long Beach and you're in the east side and you want to get involved in boxing. Well, there just so happens to be a local gym, Jack Rabbit's boxing gym, that's going to expedite that ability. It's going to be more efficient. If you have a young fighter, you want to get them involved in boxing, they're going to learn much easier than if you're taking a young white
Do you want to talk about my experience with Jack Rabbit's boxing?
Yeah.
When I arrived?
You want me to speak on it?
You should speak on it.
So, I mean, more or less, I always tease Garrity about having to pay the reparations tax.
Bro, I went to Jack Rabbit's before I knew him as well because of Trevor.
Yeah.
And I get there, and it makes sense. I get there, and if you don't know my history, if you didn't see me at shows, or if you weren't from that small, because this was after I had spent most of my after San Pedro, I spent most of my time in gyms on the east side. So in Eddie Heredia's, in a gym in Santa Fe Springs, and
in Latino
gyms.
Latino gyms.
I could introduce myself to somebody from that network, like all the people I ran into at the show on Sunday, and I might be able to gel better there. But I get to Jack Rabbit's gym, which is a black gym, and it's like, okay, here is the package that you're interested in. Like, I was sold the white package. Like, I paid a little higher price. I was assumed to be a yuppie who was looking for a workout. I was like, no, actually, I'm looking for a gym because I'm living in Pedro now.
Right.
And, I wanted to, whatever.
Someone's got to pay the reparations.
Someone's got to do it, yeah.
So like, I mean, that's, just teasing.
But now we're friends, and now I'm going to not have to pay, right?
Now you can come in, you can borrow mitts and do whatever it is that you want. You have free run of the gym. But, I mean, that's not, listen, when we're looking at these where there's an accumulation of influence, an accumulation of power, an accumulation of capital, and it's particularly with white privilege and what it is, we know that when we hear liberals or we hear academics refer to something as white hegemonies, that it doesn't have to be like it's.
Yeah, actually, I don't even know what that means, dude.
Yeah, hegemonic is just basically being defined as like a vessel of power. So it's a hegemony.
You know who gets the most upset about it? The poor whites that aren't part of that.
Yeah, but also too like.
And then I feel like poor whites and rich whites know each other less than any other.
Oh yeah. Group. But it's even.
I didn't meet poor white people until I got to South Bend, Indiana.
Yeah, but you know what?
I started working in fast food. It's like because in Los Angeles there isn't really a poor white neighborhood.
You know what they call
poor whites live in maybe in Santa Bernardino.
Norwark has poor white.
A little more inland. Yeah, well, I didn't live there. But I'm saying you don't come in contact with that.
Bellflower does, obviously. Downey.
All right. Well, now you make me look like I don't know what I'm talking about. But I feel like in Los Angeles.
Do you ever trip out on this?
White communities really are privileged.
Daniel, you ever trip out on this? What do they call poor white people?
I have no idea.
White trash.
White trash, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, but I always trip out that
I don't call them.
Yeah, I mean,
to me, those are the families on cops.
Right.
Not poor white people.
Yeah.
Like the ones that are in drug dens. Those are white trash to me.
The lucky thing about
poor white people.
The lucky thing about poor white people is that poor white people easily pass for middle class white people.
Yeah.
And middle class white people can pass for upper class. So that's whether that's
but I'm just
disadvantage or advantage.
But we're just talking to call this to you guys.
It's up to you to determine that for yourself.
And to ask you guys about this, if you guys have ever given this thought, because I've given this thought, that linguistically the narrative of poor white trash. That if I say black folks, that's synonymous with hoods. If I say Mexicans or El Salvadorians, that's synonymous with barrios. But that with white people or white folks as a whole, that you don't think of those things. That I actually have to call them.
So you have to say trash.
I have to actually call them white trash. And to look at the power of the narrative of just that influence that we have that we're not talking about.
Did I ever tell you one of my nicknames was Güero Basura?
No, why are you shitting me?
That was at the car dealership in East LA. One of my buddies, who was a boxer, Tony Avila. I wish we could get him on here.
Can we Güero Basura for the people that don't speak Spanish is white trash.
White trash,
yeah. White boy trash. So,
Güero Basura.
Yeah, but I mean, listen, if we're looking about how this things, and linguistically too, narratives that are written, that how it is that this affects race and how it is that we see in society, that if you're just looking at something as simple as that we're all accustomed to calling poor white folks white trash. The truth is, which is more appropriate for all people of that in the United States of America, for the populace as a whole, is it's probably more appropriate to refer to them as the laboring class or from the lower socioeconomic strata. From what I gather here is that somewhere along the lines, whether by intent, by design or engineering, or just by maybe just something that happened on accident, that there was a division of the lower social class strata, and that race had to sort of become a factor. And it had to become a factor because if you're looking at the 1/3 of the 1%, the people that accumulate all the wealth on top, they certainly wouldn't want the lower class to unify and have a collective identity.
Perhaps a way to bond poor whites and rich whites who don't know each other otherwise?
No, statistically, no, I don't think so at all. Statistically...
I was going to say the Republican Party.
Yeah, it's statistically...
That's kind of the guns, gods, and gays is like the way to bridge these two groups that are so different from each other.
But for the poor white laboring class out there, they don't have nothing in common with people in Newport Beach. They don't have anything in common with the Corona del Mars.
Unless there's someone else to blame out there, right?
Yeah, and so
someone that took your job or someone that...
What I'm saying is that if you got poor white folks, instead of them saying that, hey, I've got more in common with this guy next door to me that's a person of color that's doing the same job as me, whether I be a sharecropper, whether we're both working in the mine, whether we're both out there doing the same sort of labor, getting our hands dirty, getting grease on our hands every day, I have more in common with that guy. That we're looking at the populace as a whole. We're looking at how the population is set up. So the majority, if you're looking at the majority of the truth in America, is the majority of white folks in America are poor. That's fact. That's data, right? Now, there's more of an accumulation of wealth that they have than people of color because of, obviously we're talking about centuries of advantage where property could be, left over. And I forget what the number is, but it's something pretty astounding where the average white family holds a lot more wealth versus what the average black family does. But that they, in fact, have more in common with average, family of color, or not, from the same socioeconomic strata than they ever do with somebody in Newport Beach. Had the kind of the best sort of strategy that has been implemented by the Republican Party or by those on the right was to trick these people into thinking that they had more in common with rich people, rich white folks. And it's also probably...
To be fair, people might get the hint that we're not Republicans, but to be fair, I think that happened before the Republican Party's strategy. I think that happened with powerful white groups from the beginning of American politics.
You know who
right?
you know who Lee Atwater is? Probably Lee. And maybe we could ask Daniel to look this up so people could see. But Lee Atwater did something called the Southern Strategy.
Oh yeah. That's what I was going to mention. I just didn't know the name.
The Southern Strategy.
Devised
right?
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Southern. He was the
it was the way to get former...
Yeah, but what's the word? Basically, the brains behind the Nixon and Johnson, I think, too. But a Republican strategist that said, hey, listen, instead of saying, we can't say, and this is, you can look it up, it's they actually have footage of him talking about it on YouTube. But he's saying, hey, look, we can't use these words that we used to be able to say in the past, which is they're not just going to go out there and say the N-word. That they're going to say, hey, they're going to use coded language to get the white laboring class behind them. But if you're looking at America's rich history of being able to divide social class, they had to divide social class because if you didn't divide social class, there's an inevitability, which has happened, and for the most part in all other societies, that there's going to be turmoil that's going to translate over into, czars hanging from plazas or oligarchs being overthrown.
Right.
So it's a way for the 1/3 of the 1%.
It's important for
to keep that power.
Of course.
But anyone,
which is why I think it's funny that we bought into the idea that this was a populist movement, this takeover where Trump won. It's like it's been anything but populist.
Well, I mean,
since election day, it's been anything but populist. So,
I mean,
come on, but which is funny to me that this billionaire was able to get these populist sentiments.
So one thing that just to be fair to the Trump movement, and we're looking at nationalism. We're seeing nationalism spiking all over the world.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, nationalism. We see it.
Nationalism in boxing is a pretty fascinating thing too.
Yeah, but just to talk about where it really matters. Right. We're talking about nationalism that we're seeing in South America. Obviously, Brexit was reflective of nationalism there. We're seeing I'm going to pronounce
all over Europe. They're having new immigrant
Le Pen in France obviously is a nationalistic or nationalist leader. The father was as well. But these themes are happening all over the world, and there's no doubt in my mind that this is a reflection of globalization. It's a reflection of globalization because there's a scarcity of opportunity for social mobility, particularly with factories that were at one time in the countries that they come from that have been expedited to other poorer regions around the world. And that is to say that when the same thing that we're experiencing here in the United States of America, when you have a poor laboring class or a poor white laboring class that's been displaced because of technology, that's been displaced because of profit margins, because factories have been shipped overseas, because these are publicly traded companies on the S&P because they're responsible to their stockholders,
Right.
that at the end of the day, that the system isn't working for them, but it is working for the 1/3 of the 1%,
Right.
which is the accumulation
Who
of
convinces
wealth
them
on
to
top.
vote the way they
So
want to vote?
the reason why I speculate that we're seeing so many nationalistic, themes resonate across the world is because now that we're dealing with for the most part, a globalized economy, that you're talking about transnational companies that are making decisions not just here, but making decisions abroad that are for the benefit of those on top and also those that can, do things like trade on the stock market. So what we're seeing is that when you see movements that are popping up, it's for the most part laboring class that don't know what to do besides attack who they see as the boogeyman, who is the immigrant. And they see the immigrant as the boogeyman because they see
It's
the
happened
immigrant.
time and time again. It's the scapegoat.
And a scapegoat. They're seeing the immigrant as a person that they can point towards to, which is, hey, I'm losing my job. Now, because of you. Now, there's a little bit of irony in it because with the same sort of accumulation of wealth that's happening in the Middle East, for example, with specifically with those who have access to oil and energy and those resources, and an even much bigger, wider gap of wealth distribution at the poorest parts of in that region, that those folks are looking towards Europe in the same way that our neighbor, that my grandmother or people from the South are looking towards the United States as an opportunity to have social mobility and as an opportunity to have to be part of the haves and the have-nots. So, but if we're looking at who clearly is being the winner at the end of the day, who always wins, who's always going to win is the 1/3 of the 1%. Who's going to get displaced in very roundabout ways is that you're going to have laboring classes getting displaced, whether it be that from a national point of view, whether that be Americans, that be people in the UK, or that be people in France and Brazil and so forth. Or you also have a displacement that's happening with people that are native lands that have such a large scarcity of wealth that now is being distributed at home, that they're saying, hey, there's no opportunity for me to have anything here besides to make the pilgrimage or to immigrate to a place like Germany. Yeah. It's not like we're looking at these things, and it's very fascinating, and you're asking people to sort of see the transparency of it all and why these decisions are being made. But if you lift the veil and you take a good look at it, all these decisions are being made with one outcome in mind, and that outcome is profit margin. And profit margin, there's no such thing as compassionate capitalism. It's not always going to be parallel to themes like quality of life, and it's not always going to work out for people.
But it does produce a quality of life that's better for some people and not everybody. Everything has its waste products, and
that's being honest.
And then
I see where you're coming from.
The reality is, as long as we don't get hit by a meteor, solar flares that throw our technology out, there's no stopping this train. Globalization is real and it's here to stay. Yeah. I mean, just wait till people start leaving the planet for other resources.
Yeah, but this is something I hear liberals talk about leaving the planet.
I think it's but I think it's a short-sighted perspective to think you can change the world in one generation. You can't.
But
it's going to take generations, and we're going to be long gone. And the reality is, to see the real effects of the internet and we got to be here for another few hundred years.
Well,
to see the real, and I don't mean just on a global scale with the terms of global warming or whatever. I mean on a human level, because I think right now the way to make money is by going into underdeveloped countries and developing them,
right?
Just like China's doing,
which is
leaving them
to Africa, right?
But I mean, right now it's just like going into Africa for the first time. You have all these resources. It's the market's still.
Well, Africa. To be fair, Africa has been raped and pillaged by European countries.
And now it's time to do it in a different way.
For centuries.
But now it's time to do it in a different way. That's
my point. And if you're investing in infrastructure in Africa, which I know that they are, but
other countries too, not just Africa.
But there's an African e-commerce company that just went public in this last 2 weeks, and it's an example.
I mean, right?
It's that. They came out of that company that was called Rocket Internet, but basically one would consider it the Amazon of Africa. It's this e-commerce platform in Africa. Anyway, all this goes to say is that, they had a very successful IPO. All this goes to say is that indications like this are signals that there's a new level of commerce, a new level of
but not everybody.
Business.
So I understand. So a couple points.
Globalization. I'm honest because
locally in Africa.
one thing I want to say, and I won't talk again.
No, we want you to talk.
You're talking about how nationalism's rising.
Right.
Yeah, and it's a correlation with globalism rising because people.
Yeah.
This personally, I feel like this is the death throes of nationalism because everyone's like, no, I don't want to. I want to be me. I want to be, but it's inevitability. It's like Thanos with the Avengers. He's an inevitable force that's going to come in, and that's because at the end of the day, in 100 years, 200 years, 300, 400 years, with the internet spreading all over the planet, you're gonna have global Tinder. You're gonna have people being able to come and go to past countries. Borders are gonna be going out. People are gonna start fucking way more often, and you're not gonna have white, black, whatever. And the only thing that's gonna be left is for people to cling to nationalism because it's all we're gonna be Earth. And I think that people think that what I'm saying is too wishful thinking, it's too hopeful. No, it's the reality.
It's also discounting that there's a whole lot of pain and agony and suffering and sorrow and despair for a bunch of folks.
That's the way life is,
and then perhaps the one thing that
I'm also talking loud because I'm getting on this mic.
The one thing that is in question is whether or not the American dream is viable as it used to be. I mean,
the American dream didn't exist 300 years ago.
But I know, but
so you can't use that as an argument to hold up the rest of the universe from now until forever.
We're all short-sighted on perspective, particularly with our context of time. It's not like there's no way to have a time machine to know what's going to happen 100 years from now. I know that a great deal of America laboring class has been displaced from work. If I'm looking at it as just a nationalist myself, as saying, what could we do to make America greater? I understand when he said to me, hey, look, Trev, as a whole, as a whole, the world is becoming a better place because poverty is now diminishing in third world countries that have access to commerce, that have access to factories because of globalization, because the work that has been displaced in the Western world for the most part is ending up in these third world countries, that in fact you're making life better cumulatively for everyone. I totally get it. And whether or not that isn't in some sense, imperialism having to pay its own, sense of karma, that the places that were colonized and the places that were, that were imperialized, and that so much of the Western world was okay for that to happen when places like Africa or South America got raped and pillaged. That now all of a sudden that the same people that were okay with that are having their work displaced. I could jive with that.
It's just hilarious how in Great Britain they're experiencing massive waves of immigration now, much like America has for we went through all that, and there's this sentiment of people freaking out oh my God, we first of all we colonized most of the globe, and now people are coming from every stretch of the Commonwealth. People are coming to the original place where the wealth
it's not that
and we're freaking out you went everywhere.
We didn't just colonize the rest of the world. I mean, it wasn't up.
I'm talking about Great Britain colonizing.
It's the Western world did, to the point where it was 74%, or it was somewhere between 72 and 75%. But I think it's 74% of the world was at one time more or less colonized or imperialized, and this was 3 or 4 decades ago. That it didn't just stop during Manifest Destiny, that it didn't just stop during the Nina and the Santa Maria, that it kept going. Take Puerto Rico, for example.
What's happening?
Puerto Rico is, for the most part of our colony. I mean, you take American Samoa, for the most part, that's one of our colonies. Puerto Rico doesn't. The reason why there's been no reinvestment in Puerto Rico after the hurricane, and the reason why we can sort of just leave it there in despair, and most Americans are quite okay with it, is because it's not the 51st state. That it, in fact, it's a colony of ours, and that I forget how the voting rights are divvied up over there, but they're not participating in democracy. But this idea, something else that I see liberals that are talking about, is this idea that we're going to go to Mars. That there's going to be life on.
I don't see why we wouldn't go there. I think it's ridiculous that. And I don't. I think the reality is, are we going to go by the time I die?
Right, but there's
maybe not, but to say it's never going to happen, I think is ridiculous.
There's two themes that I could talk about that I've heard that get pushed out there.
Because if we don't, we're going to be all dead in 5 billion years.
But there's more.
And that's a fact. No, I mean that's a fact. If we
five
we'll
what?
be and 5 billion. No, but I'm talking about perspective.
Because of the Earth. Right.
Because the sun will explode.
Yeah. Well, you mean AOC is wrong? It's not going to happen in 12 years?
No, I don't know. But listen.
That's ridiculous.
Two messages.
Anyway, a few trillion. There's going to be no more stars left.
Yeah, but this is it does matter. Like, people have lives. This guy's talking to his Nana before she gets on before he starts a podcast. People have lives that they love. That's all. It's all like philosophical,
on a micro level.
But we're talking.
The universe doesn't give a shit about the macro level. The Earth doesn't give a fuck about humans. It's true.
But if we're to look at it like that, then why wouldn't I?
Oh no!
But
poor
why
black people? We'll just save you.
Why wouldn't I just jive with some sort of messianic complex and find myself in in the Bible, or find myself in another religious text that basically says that the end of the world is going to come? Because there's two messages that I hear out there. I hear a message from the religious folks that basically the Messiah is coming back, that there'll be a resurrection, or not a resurrection, but
for Christians,
or that the end of the world is coming, which is often being pushed out there to the religious, right? And how is that any different from liberals saying, "Hey, look, because we fucked up Earth so much, don't worry about it. We're going to go to Mars." Like they're both like it's kind of like
it's like the heaven will save
you. You're passing sort of the burden.
Like we know we're doomed, but work hard for heaven, and we're doomed, but we'll find.
Don't
Mars.
worry, technology is going to bring us to Mars.
On making yourself a better person.
Yeah, but these
because you don't have time to deal with God and whatever, because that's not on your life.
They're very.
What are you gonna do?
They're very new age philosophies, and if we're looking at something like the Maslow's law of hierarchy of needs, at the end of the day, if you're poor and you're white and your job is gone because Detroit closed, or if you're poor and black and your job is gone because Detroit closed, or if you're
shit sucks.
Okay, but that isn't necessarily, then we all need to look at something that isn't apparently working for everybody,
nothing will ever work for everybody, except for literal total annihilation.
The only thing, as this continues, the only thing I can guarantee is that individuals will continue to respond based on their incentives. So immigration will continue until we're all one big.
Even then, because some people are gonna be in Mars because they can afford to go to Mars.
Exactly.
We're not gonna.
Because you'll respond.
We're not gonna be in Mars as soon as you think we are. There's a reason why.
Okay, but what's relative? What is? Let's say it's 2,000 years from now.
I'm old enough to know that during my teens, and as a young man, that they were talking about that they would be going to Mars by the time that I'm 50. Yeah, that's 8 years from now. We're not going to be at Mars in 8 years. When my
grandma was a teenager, going to the moon was not a reality, and it happened.
Well, we don't want to go down the moon thing, right?
You can. I mean,
no, we're talking about this idea of whether we went to the moon or not. There's a bunch of weird stuff out there, which I'm sure that's a rabbit hole of whether we've been to the moon or not. You haven't been down this rabbit hole? I can't be the only one.
Briefly. I've been down there. I'm just saying.
I know it's out there.
My point
I don't get my kicks off things like that. So.
Well, no, I don't understand. One thing
I know it's out there.
And one thing I do know about humans, like no matter what, and this is just a sort of general thing about humans, that if we've gone there before, no, we're returning again. Like, and so this idea that we haven't been back to the moon in all these years, it just doesn't.
But it's only
seems
40 years.
Off. Only 40 years. Americans, every other thing that we've done from a colonial list.
Okay, have we nuked another country?
No.
We want to do that again to prove that we still have them?
Well,
have we dropped?
But this isn't.
Have we dropped a hydrogen bomb?
There is. You're using oh gosh, I forget the ad hominem sort of argument.
It's a bullshit.
It's a bullshit argument.
But I think
okay,
you're saying
they're not relevant to each other.
Also bullshit.
Yeah, but it's also just. I would ask you what versus us dropping a hydrogen bomb is. We're like jumping into.
No, I'm just saying that I think it's a my reality is no more real than the realities you're presenting. The difference is the amount of time it takes to get to them, which is why I still think China's going to be... China, number one, is real. It's not just...
I've never been
on games where you play with Chinese people and they just say that. That's a real thing because they look long-term. They don't give a fuck about the people right now. They have 100-year plans where it's turning...
Masayoshi Son, he's not Chinese, but is a the founder of SoftBank, for his company, SoftBank is this conglomerate company. It's essentially like a conglomerate and a hedge fund all in one, and a venture fund all in one. But his company's business model and mission statement, it doesn't lay out like a one generation plan. It lays out a 300-year plan for.
I mean, I think
that's the type of, some of these people have like a vision for not just their lifetime.
That's
fascinating to me.
So I would argue to you guys that if taking that into mind, that in fact that's probably more of a reflection of ego. So how is that 300-year plan working out for China? China, as we know, if you've read Gun Germs of Steel, had the biggest
stolen everything.
Yeah, but they had the biggest military fleet at one time. They had the biggest amount of resources at one time.
So did Spain.
But they did. But China didn't have to go out there and colonize and imperialize the rest of the world like Spain had to do, because they had all the resources at home. Things change from decade to decade.
Absolutely.
It isn't, if not that, from a couple years. I mean, Puerto Rico 3 or 4 years ago was a destination that we'd probably want to go to for a family vacation. Doesn't seem like they're going to fix it up anytime soon.
It's going to get worse too.
I just think that when we start living in this abstract idea of possibilities and being like, well, at the end of the day, what does it matter? It's all going to fall apart anyways.
That's why you gotta concentrate on yourself.
All right. Perfect. So Trevor,
What?
You're right. Daniel, you're right. When you take a big enough scope back, none of this matters. Trevor, you're right.
I mean, I didn't say that. I wasn't being nihilist about it.
He is a nihilist.
But Trevor, you're also right. You're also right that in the real time it does matter. My nana called me and I need to go help her with something, so that's actually coming back to me. And to go back to what you said on all that matters is taking care of yourself. I think that's a valuable statement too. And I would like to close this episode with a quote from George Carlin, one of the best. Why do so many people need help? Life is not complicated. You get up, you go to work, eat 3 meals,
yelling.
take one good shit, and go back to bed. What's the fucking mystery?
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, that's true.
I love that guy.